There were 6 people seated at table 63 that night in September 2012. 2 are now dead. 1 is in prison for murder. 1 survived an attempt on his life. The other 2 have kept a low profile while remaining in the community in Winnipeg. It is a moment frozen in time. 6 friends sit down for a late night bite after hours of club hopping, drinking, dancing, and socializing. They're sharing laughs and jokes, not only among themselves, but with the good-natured waitress who's just brought their plates of runny eggs, fluffy pancakes, and greasy sausage. Except for 2 elderly men paying their bills at the front counter, Table 63 is the only one occupied inside the Salisbury House restaurant on Pembina Highway in the early morning hours of this midweek shift. These South End Winnipeg boys, raised in middle-class suburbia, were living in the moment. They've got money, good looks, and plenty of charm and charisma. Life is pretty damn good. A door chime sounds, and a masked man enters. He's armed with a high-powered gun and deadly intentions. The events that transpired September 27, 2012 would shock the community. In just a few seconds, numerous lives were forever shattered. So, a Winnipeg Free Press Mike McIntyre investigation detailed in this Winnipegology episode shows the fallout from that bloody night continues, tying up extensive police resources in at least 2 provinces, multiple unsolved murders, an attempted execution in broad daylight, a never-before-heard apparent confession from a dead man, allegations of a wrongful conviction, links to old crimes, and notorious cons and convicts. We're left here with a bit of a mess, Court of Queen's Bench Justice Chris Martin said during a recent series of interviews and court hearings surrounding these matters. With no official organized crime affiliation, Lau, who was 23 years old, was essentially an independent proprietor who rubbed plenty of people the wrong way. The first attempt on his life came in June 2012 when Lau was struck by a vehicle. He had just left the Osborne Village Motor Inn, and the incident was clearly no accident. Witnesses described several suspects getting out of the vehicle and repeatedly kicking and stomping Lau, rendering him unconscious. They stripped him of his clothes before fleeing. So, he's leaving a bar. Some people, I don't know, knew he was there, heard he was there, happened to see him, came upon him, hit him with their car, stopped the car, jump out, continue to stomp and beat him, stripped him down naked, and left him there, not moving, unconscious. Lau was rushed to the hospital where he spent a week recovering from extensive injuries, including a fractured skull. When the attack occurred, he was with a good friend, Jordan Fries. He was not injured in the incident. Pardon me. So Jordan Fries brings him to the hospital. He was there. Nothing happened to him. I guess he saw it, didn't get involved at the time, but got him to the hospital at least. Lau and Fries weren't cooperative with police in providing descriptions of suspects or potential motives. That's not surprising when you've lived this type of lifestyle. No arrests had been made in that case. Okay, so if they know who did it, they weren't telling the cops who did it, and so we don't know who did it at that time. A few months later, Lau and Fries were sitting out inside the Salisbury House at table 63. This was on that fateful night in September 2012. Joining them that night were 4 other friends: Justin Latinecz, Rob McGurr, Kwong Nguyen, and the man we'll call John Doe because his identity is presented by a court order. Although Mike McIntyre was calling him John Doe, but the other guy was Jordan Freeze. So this was the guy who was at the hotel that night. He just said they're sitting together at table 63, and then he doesn't say his name. So I'm not sure what protection of identity there was there. On that, and then there was nobody else at the table. On that night, Latinecz, and I might not be pronouncing that correct, and I apologize if I'm not pronouncing names correctly to anybody's involved. And several of them had gone to various clubs and bars before stopping at the Salisbury House for some food. So they all went out to the club, they went to Sal's. He said they didn't get any negative vibes earlier in the night. It was all good times, he said. If I knew that shit was gonna happen, I wouldn't have gone. The masked man who came into the diner was targeting Lau. The investigation found that Lau and 5 other friends were sitting in a booth at the Salisbury House restaurant when the shooter stormed the front of the building and opened fire on the group just after 3 a.m. Lau was shot 5 times and died a short time later, while another man was also shot and survived. Okay? So he's screaming for someone to help his friend. Save my friend, please save my friend. Somebody just save my friend. Tina Schultz, who was working at the Salisbury House on Pembina when a masked gunman walked in and shot 2 people in the fall of 2012, recalled in court back on June 9th at that time. So when the suspect is walking in, okay, he's got on clean white sneakers, pair of jeans, a hoodie, pulled tight or some type of white mask. He's got black gloves, a semi-automatic pistol. It's got not an overly long extendo clip. You know, I know you can't tell how wide it is, but he left with it empty, and he was letting it off because he went directly at him, firing upwards of 20 shots. Okay, so it was the double stack, 10 on each side type magazine. So Freeze or John Doe was struck twice in the arm and ankle by gunfire, only because he was sitting next to Lau. The other 4 at the table weren't hurt. Okay, so this guy happens to be with Lau again. Another incident happens. He's hit up. Lau's dead. 20 shots they put on Lau. It's not rocket science. It was a hit, Freeze told a Winnipeg jury in June 2006 while testifying for the Crown. If he wanted to kill the whole table, he would have shot everyone at the table. So when it was just a little scuffle and, he pulled through, they weren't talking to cops. When his man got killed, he got up on the stand and he said, I was there. Yes, this is what I saw, and Latinecz also, he was 22 years old at the time, broke down in tears as he told police how he desperately tried to save Lau, using his shirt as a tourniquet and pleading for others in the diner to get help. He described watching the gunman flee from the restaurant and get into a waiting vehicle he believed was a Lincoln Zephyr or an MKX, so into a newer model Lincoln. An unknown person then drove the killer away. So, these are street guys, but you just killed their best friend in front of them. They're giving police the information that they were able to give him at that time, out of hoping for, I guess, justice or consequences for, what's happened to their friend. Now, police would find a trail of evidence nearby as well, including the gun used to kill Lau, a white t-shirt the killer is believed to have pulled over his face, and a pair of black gloves. Okay, so it was a bit of a mask. It was just the hoodie pulled tight. He had a t-shirt over his face. DNA testing would provide a mixed profile on the shirt and gloves, with the primary contributor being found to be a man named Devin Hall. So there's DNA on these items that they tied back to a guy named Devin Hall. Police also searched car rental records and discovered a Lincoln MKZ similar to the vehicle described by Latinecz had been rented by a man named Matthew Laverne, a friend of Hall. Hall's name was also on the rental agreement, police discovered. So they find his DNA on the stuff that was used in the murder. One of the witnesses describes a Lincoln that was driving away, and his friend rented a Lincoln. Police arrested Hall, who was 30 years old, in February 2013, and he was charged with first-degree murder. He didn't say anything. He didn't give a statement or anything. Laverne, whose name was on the rental agreement, was arrested in June 2013 under suspicion of being the getaway driver. But police ultimately released him without charge following 10 hours of questioning in which he would not talk. So these guys aren't talking. They've got some circumstantial evidence that, was enough to say they're building a case, but, what the lawyer says is they got no case on him. They interviewed him for hours. They've got nothing on him. He refused to say anything to them. Hall's lawyer, Martin Glazer, tells the Free Press at that time. So Hall has a prominent attorney. He's fighting this. The evidence is not that strong. An arrest usually signals the end of an investigation. It turned out the police work involving this group was only just beginning. Jordan Fries was still reeling from watching his friend die. Now the 25-year-old Winnipeg man was in custody, having been charged with a killing at a St. Boniface house party. Okay, so this is the guy, he got hit. He went on to testify about that. He was also there when his man got run over and stomped down. This is the same dude. He was arrested in June 2013 after attacking Kyle de Vasconcelos, who was 23 years old. The two men had been socializing on Notre Dame Street when violence erupted. Dave Vasconcelos stumbled from the scene, collapsed and died outside a home on the 200 block of Rue de Moulin. The beating and stabbing were so severe, police initially thought the victim had been shot. One of the knife wounds pierced his heart. Fries and de Vasconcelos were described as associates, although there's no suggestion the killing had any connection to the Salisbury House incident. At trial earlier this year, Fries denied involvement in that killing, suggesting someone else must have inflicted the deadly wounds. Jurors did not believe him, and they found him guilty of second-degree murder. So, his buddy got killed. He's testifying, pointing the finger, doing whatever he can to cooperate. Somebody gets killed that's associated with him. He's alleged to have been the one behind it. And I'm innocent, but unfortunately, it came back around on him. He was given a life sentence with no chance of parole for at least 10 years. The victim's family member questioned how he could play God by taking a life. So, what we have as an issue in this situation now is the Crown's key witness was dead. Justin Latinecz, who provided info about the getaway driver and Lau's killing, was shot and killed less than 24 hours after the 1-year anniversary of that crime. So, evidence was a little thin. You have a key witness now has been murdered. A 27-year-old friend was also wounded in the attack, which happened in a back lane outside Latinez's Essex Avenue home in St. Vital. It was an ambush, probably set up as a drug transaction. Then the gunman popped up and unloaded on them. A justice source told the Free Press, and the source's name is being protected because the person is not authorized to speak on the case, the murder case remains unsolved at the time of this episode. So, hey, he said, look, the gunman popped out and unloaded on him. Don't tell nobody my name or that I told you that, but this was a pack. They said, oh, yeah, oh, how much, 50? 100? That's it? Oh, yeah, I'll meet you at the back lane. Bet. And it wasn't not about getting his nose wiped, nothing. This was a body. And they left him, and they left. And his man was there, hit, but not bad. Although Latinecz was dead, police had videotaped his interview and would later play it in court for jurors at Hall's trial. So Hall stands accused of the Salisbury House thing. They recorded the interview, but it can't be cross-examined because he's dead. It's allowed in. In his statement, Latinecz admitted his group had connections to the drug trade in Winnipeg and Lau was a dealer. Okay, so these guys that are sitting there are in the streets. They sell drugs. Independently, they're their own thing. These other guys are accused of apparently having some animosity towards them and taking their lives one by one. Latinecz got a tattoo on his neck commemorating the date of Lau's death, and he was apparently honoring his friend in another way as well. He took over the selling of drugs for Lau when he was killed. And so that's what the guy that doesn't want his name out says, at least. So who killed Latinecz? One suspect could be clearly ruled out. That's Devin Hall. He was in jail because Latinecz put him in jail for Lau's killing at Salisbury House. But a key figure would emerge when another attack, perhaps linked to Table 63, occurred months later. So Jeffrey Lau had been executed. Jordan Fries was in prison for the stabbing murder that he got himself tied up in. Justin Latinecz was also dead. These are the guys that's sitting at the table. And now Rob McGurr was on the receiving end of an attempt on his life. McGurr had to dodge bullets after two masked men opened fire in a crowded parking lot near the University of Manitoba, nearly missing their target in June 2014. He had just emerged from the Max convenience store in the area of Pembina Highway and Chancellor Drive when two shots were fired at him around 7 p.m. and both missed. Okay, just two shots. He got away. McGurr fled while the gunman sped away. Several witnesses gave detailed information to police, including the suspects throwing a gun out of the car window on Bison Drive. Police located a loaded .45 caliber Colt handgun, which had the serial number removed. Two men were arrested that evening during a traffic stop. Police found body armor and handcuffs in their vehicle. One of the accused turned out to be a familiar face to the police, Matthew Laverne. So the suspected getaway driver in Lau's killing, who was never charged. He just sat there, he didn't say anything, they didn't have enough, they never charged him. He had a rental agreement on a Lincoln in his name and in Hall's name. He was identified as the one who shot at McGurr. His friend Brian Devlin was charged as well. So Laverne, who was 31 at that time, and Devlin, who was 32, pled guilty after striking a deal with the Crown, and they received 5-year prison terms. The courts heard that McGurr was being watched by the two. They put a GPS tracker on his vehicle days earlier, and this suggested that what they were doing had a level of planning. This wasn't a spontaneous act. The execution seemed a bit shaky for the fact that they knew where he was, and they kind of could have got him anywhere, anytime. But he probably had his head on a swivel. It's quite an interesting case, to say the least, Prosecutor Jocelyn Richaud told the court. However, no backdrop to the incident was provided, including a possible motive. Lawyers said it was a true plea bargain, with both sides giving things up to come to a resolution. The actions of the accused were reckless and extremely dangerous to public safety, said Queen's Bench Joan McKelvey. Quite clearly, there was a callous disregard for public safety. They had his DNA on items linked to the killing, along with the rental car agreement which bore his name. Would it be enough to convince jurors that Hall was guilty of murdering Jeffrey Lau? That's a question remaining still. So as Devin Hall's trial began in June 2016, defense lawyer Martin Glazer put his own expert on the stand to say the DNA evidence doesn't prove Hall fired the gun. That's because investigators found what's known as a mixed profile on the items, with DNA traces from at least 3 people. The primary source was Hall, but Glazer's expert told jurors it didn't exclude the possibility of an unidentified DNA on the items belonging to the actual killer that was in and among the mix of DNA profiles. Jurors were given several possible explanations of how Hall's DNA could have been on the items. If he had nothing to do with the shooting, transferring his DNA through contact with the killer, innocently touching items at some point, or even having the gloves and shirt come into contact with other items or locations where his DNA had been left behind. I don't know how my DNA got on the gloves and the gun and the t-shirt and the mask. I don't know. Glazer also suggested there was no direct evidence the car rented by Laverne, with Hall also listed on the documents, was the same one described by Latinecz at the scene. It looked similar, sure, but nobody could say it was the same vehicle. So it's circumstantial evidence. It seems a bit overwhelming. In his most aggressive move, Glazer began pointing out similarities between the Lau killing and the unsolved Latinecz murder a year later, suggesting there could be a link. So if you look at the timeline of events that he's trying to lay out, he says, in June 2012, Lau's attacked on Osborne Street by several men. He got the skull fracture. They hit him with the car. No arrest is ever made. Then in September 27, 2012, Jeffrey Lau is shot and killed at the Salisbury House. Devin Hall is charged with the first-degree murder in that. Then we're talking about Jordan Freeze, charged with second-degree murder for stabbing and a beating death in a St. Boniface house party, which he's convicted of that. September 28, 2013, Justin Latinecz is shot and killed outside his home in St. Vital, and no arrest is made, and the case is unsolved. So what the lawyer wants to pause on that to say is that my client's in jail. Whoever shot Lau probably is the same guy who killed Latinecz. We don't know who did it, but it was probably that guy did both. And then in June 30th, the following year in 2014, Rob McGurr escapes injury after being shot at near the University of Manitoba. Matthew Laverne and a second suspect are arrested and later convicted. And that's where we're at with this thing. So Glazer said, look, these are both targeted attacks. My client's in jail. One guy's killed. The second guy's injured. I don't know if the guy that's convicted of this thing did both or what. My guy's in jail. 9mm bullets are used in both shootings. He's saying, look, my client was in jail for this murder when Latinecz was killed, meaning the same killer, if he's responsible for both, it couldn't have been Hall. He's trying to build a straw man. He's doing what he's getting paid to do. He's trying to say, there's reasonable doubt. Are you being reasonable with this? Do you know that this guy did this? The atmosphere going on between these groups of people is one of hostility, retaliation. Another person comes out and shoots. This is all part of the dangerous lifestyle we say Lau is leading and the world he participated in. This was a group involved in bad things. They've got friends involved in bad things. This is all interconnected, Glazer told the court. There were people out to get him. There were people with motive to kill him. Pardon me again, referring to Lau. He's saying, there's people that are killing his friends. When my guy's in jail, that's just could be the same people that killed him. Lots of people want to kill this guy. Look, he just got run over by a car. They don't know who did that. They don't know who did this next one and the other one. But so how the hell do you know that my guy had a thing to do with this? Sergeant Douglas Bailey of the Homicide Unit revealed Latinez's case remains a priority. It's an open, ongoing investigation. Ultimately, who is responsible for that has not been determined, he told the jurors. The Crown Attorney, Brent Davidson, went even further, telling court Matthew Laverne was considered a person of interest in the Latinecz killing during legal submissions the jury was not privy to. It had already been proven Laverne went after Rob McGurr by shooting at him in 2014. Is it possible he also took aim at Latinecz in 2013? The main witness, whose testimony about the getaway vehicle led police to both him and Hall for the 2012 killing of Lau. Okay, so he's pointing the finger at the guy they originally talked to about it. They didn't apparently have enough on him. They charged Hall. He goes on to try to, continue living the life that he's living, and puts a GPS tracker on another guy that was at the table that's taking over this hustle that's being passed around from Lau. And they're saying, well, maybe he killed all of them. I don't know. He's in jail right now for trying to kill Rob McGurr at that time. He had 5 years he's facing for that. But did he do everything? We don't know. We're looking at him, they said. Glazer also suggested the people who tried to kill Lau and Osborne in 2012 were the ones responsible. Davidson noted it didn't automatically help Glazer's clients since there's no proof Hall wasn't involved in that attack. So they're just inferring, look, it could have been him, it couldn't. We don't know if it was him. We don't know who did those things. Was it your guy that time? Because he wasn't in jail then. So he said, well, look, though, we don't think it was him, but it could have been somebody, it could have been anybody. Look who's after this guy. Everyone's after this guy. One thing Glazer couldn't do is suggest Laverne was the one who shot Lau. That's because Laverne is a beefy 260 pounds and stands 5'5". Surveillance video that captured part of the restaurant shooting shows a much taller, skinnier suspect. So it's tough. He's saying, well, it could have been him, and they're saying, no, it couldn't be that guy. He's a big fat guy. This guy's a tall, skinny guy. I mean, we're not stupid. Whoever did this wasn't that and the third, So he's like, well, but there's other pieces to this, though, that you guys don't, we don't know. We don't know is the point. And so he says, we admit Mr. Laverne is not the slender shooter because of his appearance, Glazer told the court. However, Glazer did raise eyebrows when he suggested another person entirely may be responsible for not only killing Lau, but also gunning down Latinecz. He told the Court of Queen's Bench Justice Chris Martin he planned to bring a motion suggesting a third party was responsible. So this was a different kind of defense that he says. He says it was a blast from the past. Joel Geddes was as violent as they come. A former member of the Zigzag Crew, a puppet club of the Hells Angels, was convicted of manslaughter in the 2003 baseball bat beating of 18-year-old Morgan Trudeau outside a Pembina Highway bar. He would serve just 15 months in custody. So, there's a party going on. It's just outside. It's a Pembina Highway bar. There's a young man there. He gets into a confrontation. He's only 18 years old. His name was Morgan Trudeau. And Joel Geddes is alleged to have been driving by or something to that effect with a baseball bat and cracked him in the head with it, and it killed Morgan. And because these are young offenders at that time, he would serve just 15 months in custody for that murder. So following his release from jail, he and 3 other men were charged in a violent 2006 gangland kidnapping and beating. The victim was allegedly taken from a Pembina Highway restaurant, tied to a post in a basement for more than 10 hours, and hit with brass knuckles and the butt end of a gun, suffering a variety of injuries. Joel Geddes. One of his co-accused was none other than his good friend and former neighbor, Devin Hall. Okay, so him and Devin Hall tied a guy to a pole in the basement and tortured him. Okay, they beat and tortured him. This was a drug rival. And Hall would have his charges dismissed at a preliminary hearing. Geddes and his other 2 co-accused, Garry Godson and Jared Billings, were ordered to stand trial, only to have the Crown enter a stay of proceedings in 2008 when the victim couldn't be located. Okay. So, the guy that got tortured, nobody knows what happened to him. Nobody knows where he is. So, there's no case. Geddes and Godson would cross paths with police again in 2011. Geddes was arrested and charged with dangerous driving after allegedly fleeing a police attempt at a spot check. Officers identified him as the driver, but his charge was dropped when Godson stepped forward and claimed that he was the one behind the wheel, making the admission at one of Geddes' court hearings. The Crown asked the police to investigate further, and this was confirmed. So, Geddes was arrested. They said, hey, we're stopping you. You just took off. You were driving there. And Godson says, actually, I was the one that was driving there. Godson, who was also a friend of Hall, that's standing accused of the Salisbury House murders, ultimately pleaded guilty, and he was given a 6-month jail term. So he said, look, it wasn't Geddes, it was me. Okay, well, you get 6 months for that. You can't just take off on us. Oh, yeah, okay, I'll go to jail. In April 2015, Godson was found shot dead after police were called to the area of Highfield Street and Chandos Avenue in Norwood Flats. Neighbors reported hearing as many as 5 shots. No arrests have been made, and no motive for his killing has been disclosed by the police. So, this is now yet after the attempt on Rob McGurr. A known associate to these guys, Godson, gets murdered. Okay? 6 months later, Geddes meets a similar fate. He was gunned down outside of a home in a Calgary suburb in what police called a targeted murder. It happened on his 8-year-old son's birthday. The boy witnessed the deadly attack. The killing is also unsolved. Okay, so there's yet now the latest murder. Joel Geddes is murdered. So this is a war, okay? When you're killing a man on his son's 8-year birthday in front of him, okay? So at Hall's trial in June, now that's followed all of this because it takes a while to these homicides. Glazer, the lawyer, says he had a witness willing to come forward and say that Geddes was the real killer of not only Lau, but also Latinecz, I think is actually, Latinecz? I apologize for that one. But the guy got shot in St. Vital back lane, that hit, they said that was Geddes that did that. And Godson and them. This is the type of guys we're talking about now. Glazer ultimately abandoned the third-party suspect motion, saying he didn't think he could tender the evidence because it would be considered self-serving. It hadn't been given to any authorities. It hadn't been recorded and couldn't be tested through cross-examination since Geddes couldn't be produced in court. So because this wasn't a videotaped interview with police, it's not the same thing. Once somebody's dead, you can't just say something they said. Okay? There can be, there has to be authorities involved. It has to be recorded. And then, you'd like to have it cross-examined. But so it can't even be produced in court with what they had. The Crown likely would have argued, though, it's convenient to try and blame a dead person, especially one who was good friends with Hall, in an attempt to exonerate him, and they were planning to fire back on all cylinders by shredding the credibility of people such as Geddes and Laverne. For a first-degree murder trial, there's been a lot of twists and turns, Justice Chris Martin said during the course of legal arguments on these issues. Things have gone quite differently at this trial than I anticipated they would. And, take that in because look, you got DNA, you got this guy here, and the Glazer is a bulldog, and he's trying to eat this thing. He's trying to eat this case. He's gnawing on it, and he's slobbering on this trial. But the Crown claimed Glazer had also done damage by not subtly raising the possibility Laverne or someone else could be responsible while cross-examining certain witnesses in front of the jury. We're left with as many... he says, we're left with, as my children would say, a take-backsy, said Davidson. No words can be used to put the genie back in the bottle. So Davidson's looking at this and he's saying, Glazer, you ran up and down on this thing. You've tainted this jury. You brought in a theory, and now you kind of are taking it back because you can't really stand the test. You couldn't bring it in, but you brought it in. Martin ultimately warned jurors to disregard any evidence they heard during the trial about the issue. So that's tough. Does the jury disregard it? They're told to. Do they? We'll see. You are to give no weight and draw no inferences from it, he said. So who was the mystery witness they were going to point the finger of blame at? Joel Geddes? Yeah, they're pointing at him. But who was pointing at him? Who were we talking about that's saying that he did this? None other than his own mother. So, Glazer recently revealed at that time to the Free Press that Joanne Geddes claimed her son was responsible for the killing. Both Lau and Latinecz prior to his own violent demise. She said it was part of an ongoing drug turf war. So Joanne Geddes tries to put this all into to context for us, and she says, I've got a very strong reason to believe it was Joel who walked into that Salisbury house and not Devin, Geddes told the Free Press. And I've got a very strong reason to believe Joel went and took care of the guy in St. Vital too. Joanne Geddes said it was common knowledge on the street. Her son was robbed by Lau and others of an expensive gold chain months prior to the Salisbury House murder. Okay? And she said the June 2012 attack on Lau outside the Osborne Village Motor Inn was carried out by her son in retaliation to Lau trying to steal his crack phone. Okay, so she's saying her son and Lau have a history going back a long ways, robbing each other, trying to rob each other, attacking each other. So as well, she claims that Lau, McGurr, and others in that group had put a $250,000 contract out on Joel Geddes, leaving her son with no choice but to essentially kill or be killed. Okay, so she's saying that they put $250,000 on Joel's head, and Joel said, well, there's only one way to deal with that, I guess, and that's to get rid of all these guys. They want to put 50 each or whatever they think they're doing. I'm knocking each one of them off the board, according to his mother. They're coming after him and his family. Joel was cornered, said his mother. Although her son never explicitly told her he carried out any killings, Geddes said he had no doubts. Okay, so we're at the point where it's Garry Godson is shot and killed in Winnipeg. No arrest is made. Joel's killed in Calgary. No arrests are made. So a lot of the people involved are either dead or in jail, or almost dead or had an attempt on their life. It's been a very, it's been a war. There's no other word for that. Joel wouldn't say that to me, his mom said. What Joel says to him or to her are things like, okay, that settles it. I know what I gotta do. That's going to be taken care of. After the Salisbury shooting, he told her, I gotta disappear. You're not gonna see me for a while. So, why is he saying that? As well, she said her prediction about her son's fate ultimately came true. She says, I understand Joel is in that life, and there are consequences to that lifestyle, she said. 10 days before he was killed, she told Joel, they're coming for you. You're gonna die. What am I gonna do? During mid-trial arguments, which the jury was excluded from hearing, Glazer wanted to ask police if they considered Geddes a suspect in Lau's murder. The Crown inquired and answered by simply repeating only Hall and Laverne were arrested, and only Hall ended up being charged. Despite the circumstantial evidence, including the DNA link and the car rental, Glazer said he believes the woman's story to be truthful. I think it's pretty compelling. What this person has to say makes this a wrongful conviction. Definitely, said Glazer. I don't think Hall was involved in this. I think Geddes was involved in both. Hall was convicted of Lau's murder, with jurors only needing a few hours to deliberate following the 3-week trial. I'm telling you, they put an innocent guy away, said Joanne Geddes. Laverne remains behind bars for a few more years of his involvement for his shots at McGurr. So, he could still be charged as a suspected getaway driver in Lau's killing should the police or the Crown feel the evidence strong enough at some point. There's no statute of limitations on murder. As well, Latinec's murder remains under investigation, with Laverne identified as a person of interest in that. So he only got about 5 years for the attempted murder on Rob McGurr, but there's other cases that they could try to maybe put on him. He's still alive. Hall's still alive. He's convicted, though. The man found to be by jurors to be behind the mask inside the Salisbury House started his mandatory life sentence with no chance of parole for at least 25 years. He filed his appeal, but his two former friends, Geddes and Godson, are dead. Okay. Joanne Geddes believes that both of these attacks are linked to what started on the street, spilled over into Salisbury House, and is now carried on for years. That's 100%, she said. I would like everyone to know I forgive whoever. I don't care who it was. I don't care if they ever get picked up. I'm telling you, this should end. I'd like the other families to know I'm really sorry. It's not just our kids, it's the people above the kids that get them involved. Turn both sides against them. They don't care as long as they get their money. That's the way the world works. So we have to look at the totality of the guys involved in this. They're either in jail for murder, somebody tried to murder them, they got murdered, or, they're in jail for an attempted murder and that type of thing. So everybody kind of really lost in this, but there was one guy left standing, more or less, which was Robert McGurr. He was close. They put the GPS on his car. They tried to kill him. He evaded that. He's alive and living. So violence begets more violence. What do they say again? Live by the gun, die by the gun. This is a story of supply and demand. These were rival drug dealers killing each other for customers and territory. A crack phone is a phone that has a number of known crack phone numbers, crack dealers and past crack line phone numbers forwarded to it. So when people go to jail, you might give up their phone, or they forward it to another phone and forward it to another phone, and these phones start amalgamating. Drug dealers would get robbed for their phones. Some would sell their phones. And these phone lines were amalgamated into one ultimate crack hotline. And he who proved worthy to possess the phone possessed the throne. You have the demand, so you get the supply. You get the money. You get the power. See, supply is abundant, but it's he who has the demand that can command the bag. These phones did not stop ringing all day with addicts ready to spend their cash on whomever will drop off their medicine. A valuable book of business to acquire in the streets. Still, it became more than that. What about when it's no longer about the money? It's become personal, blood for blood, the ops, the opposition. When it's money on your head and you know it could come from anywhere. You done killed their best friends. They done killed some of yours. You can't even stop at a red light anymore or operate during civilian hours because you don't know where it's coming from until suddenly the day comes and your card gets punched. Death or jail. A familiar outcome for most of these stories. A bloody revenge-fueled feud, a war that stretched from Winnipeg to Calgary and still may not be over to this day. We'll see how much further fallout remains to be seen as a result from the incident at Table 63. One thing is clear. Whomever Joel may or may not have killed over the years, in Joel Geddes' final moments, he knew his 8-year-old son was right there. All he could do was hope the child would be spared as the boy stood there forever scarred, witnessing the life leave his father's body. We can only wonder what long-term effect that will have on the young child. Winnipegology.